Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Africa here on Luvbay, Afrobeat Music and Talk Radio, your number one global African and Caribbean online radio. We go live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our studios are in Toronto, Canada, and we do invite guests from all over the place. I know some of you have wondered where do we broadcast from? Well, listen, I am actually in the U.S. Of course, I am a Canadian citizen who has been loaned to the U.S. here. I am really delighted that we have a special guest with us today. And today's program is very, very special. We're going to be looking at the connections between Africans, Native Africans, and Native Canadians. Wow, this is exciting. And I am so glad that you have made time to be with us today. And this is your host, Dr. FM, Dr. Francis Munangi Mpindu, your host here on today's Africa on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Like I said, this is the number one global African Caribbean online radio. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, StreamYard. And so we are delighted and thank you for making time to be with us. And we go live in over 100 different countries around the world. And that's why we say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And so again, thank you for joining us. Like I said, today we are in for a real treat. In Canada, the celebrations, the recognition of the truth and reconciliations between the Indigenous people and the rest of Canada is something that is celebrated every year. And we are really delighted that our executive team was invited by APTN, which is the Aboriginal People's Television Network in Canada, a very, very established and powerful media platform. And so we are delighted today. We have Mr. Victor Linklater. We call him Vic, and he goes by Vic as well. And so I had the privilege of actually being on the res, as they call it, in Moose Cree, on Moose Factory in Northern Ontario in Canada. And I served and worked there for 3 years. And what a powerful, powerful opportunity that was. It was life transforming. And you will see as we have a conversation today that this has had such a powerful impact in my life in ways that my life has been enhanced, and I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity. And so here we are with Vic Linklater here. In fact, just as we were getting ready to come into the studio, I wanted to ask him if he actually has an Aboriginal name, because I like to believe he does. And so I was just curious, but I didn't ask him then. So hopefully he can let us in. So Vic Linklater used to be the land-based program coordinator, a powerful, powerful program where they would take our brothers and sisters onto the part of the land, onto an island, and just process things and help our brothers and sisters to connect with the land. And so we're going to go into that because this was, and it still is, Vic's passion. And so we're just delighted that he is with us. So, Mr. Vic Linklater, thank you for joining us, sir. Waje, waje.
Wadje, Vic Linklater in Dislocation, Moose Factuous. It's a pleasure to be here. We call Francis the Blue Man here in Moose Factory in Cree Indigenous territory because he explained to us the history, and he is affectionately known to us as the Blue Man. So it's a pleasure to be here.
You're absolutely right. In fact, I will get into that. I was really fascinated by the fact that in indigenous culture, there was no term or reference to black. So you know how oftentimes as Africans we go to different places where some other people would refer to us as black people. It doesn't exist in native culture. I was blue man, so I was fascinated by that, and I see that he's wearing a blue shirt. I should have worn my blue shirt. Oh, there we go. Because I was really fascinated by that there was no concept of black. In fact, in their four distinct colors, there's the white, there's the red, and there was the blue, and of course the yellow, which represents Asians and stuff. So this is something that we will touch on as well, because it was really fascinating to know. Because growing up in Africa, I never knew that people would refer to me as black. I knew that I was African, and I knew that my skin tone was different from others, but we never referred to ourselves as black. So coming into Moose Factory with Moose Cree First Nations and being told that I was blue, I was fascinated. And I have often used that just in connecting with people and just say, my brothers and sisters in Moose Factory, they always referred to me as the blue boy, the blue man. And of course, I used to refer myself as the res boy right there on the reservation, something that really fast, just not affected, but it impacted my life in very, very special ways. In fact, every time I think about it, there's a sadness within me that just creeps up, and I still have very, very special memories of that. So, um, you were the land-based program coordinator. Would you tell us the vision behind that, and what was it that made this program such an integral part of Moose Cree First Nation?
Okay, thank you, Blue Man.
I like
I
that.
I just want to just start by saying that I thank you for thinking about me and thinking about Moose Cree First Nation in this wonderful broadcast that you're doing across the world. I think that's important. I think that's an important dialogue that many people in non-Indigenous continents and countries need to hear. Um, with that, I am Moose Cree, which is in northern Ontario, northern Canada, the northern part of Ontario. If you've ever been to Toronto, Toronto's the southern part of it. So we're way up north, the opposite end. And Moose Factory got its start. The name Moose Factory sounds funny, sounds comedic, but it actually is a reference to the Hudson's Bay Company, which is a British entity that existed some 400 years. And Moose Factory was the first English-speaking colony, if you will, of this entity of Hudson's Bay Company. And the river here in Cree is moose, just like the animal. And the factory part of it refers to the factor, the chief factor of Hudson's Bay at the time, which is kind of like the supervisor today, the big boss. So they likened those two words to moose factory. So that's how we got the name. And henceforth, there's no factory here that makes moose. And so I work for the Moose Cree. I currently work for the Moose Cree First Nation. It's a government organization that represents the entire populace of 5,000 plus Indigenous peoples, Cree people here in the area. And I first got my start as the land-based coordinator. I did that for 6 years, and what it came out of the sheer need to deal with the epidemic of addiction, and the epidemic of alcohol and drugs and other paraphernalia that arrived on our shores. So, in a sense, it was kind of like a light for the people that are struggling with addictions, and we offered many services from grief to loss of identity to addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs of any sort now in this day and age. It's all kinds, so it's extremely important that we continue to work towards that, of helping our own people. And I did that for 6 years and built it up. About I'm thinking in kilometers in Canadian, but in miles, I'd say it's about 8 miles north. I'm south of the community of Moose Factory. The community of Moose Factory is an island, a small island that's about 3 miles by 2 mile, 4 miles long, wide, 3 miles long, and the land-based site is called Bimbinjuak, which means walking with our people. Um, Started, as I mentioned, 6 years ago, and it continues to run today. So that's in a nutshell as to what it's about.
Thank you very much, Vic, for making reference to um, the issues behind why this powerful program, the land-based program, was actually introduced. You mentioned addictions. You mentioned, dealing with intergenerational issues. One of the things I'm really, really grateful for and thankful for eternally is how being on the reservation, living there and working there and connecting with the people, realizing that there's a lot of misinformation and ignorance about indigenous people. And so being there really just opened my eyes to see what has been happening. And I was still an outsider, and regardless of how long I would have stayed there, I don't think I would have ever, ever come close to thinking that I know and understand. I don't. But that exposure really helped me to understand why, for the longest, there was just a sense of, just ignorance, not knowing what has been happening. And so this was really, really important. By the way, I should mention, just for the sake of our other brothers and sisters from other parts of the world who may not be aware of this, in Canada there are three distinct categories of indigenous people. So we have the First Nations, which is part of what our brother Vic is and represents. So we have First Nations, and then we have the Inuit, and then we have the Métis. So the Inuit, when I was growing up in Africa, we used to refer to them as Eskimos. And I didn't realize until I got to Canada that that is a derogatory term. You don't use it because it's defining people by what they do. And so basically, Eskimo means eaters of raw meat. Some other person put that label on them, but the Inuit is really the people, just like the First Nations are the people. And of course, the third one, the Métis, would be comparable to the colored people. When white settlers came to Africa, they were fascinated and discovered how beautiful African women were. And so they ended up having children with them and created colored people. So in Africa, especially, I'm thinking Zimbabwe, South Africa, and other parts of Africa where there was a presence of Europeans there, they ended up creating the colored people. So, and I remember explaining that, and people in Canada, especially most Cree, they're like, "Oh, we thought you were colored," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." I remember this. I think it was one of the former chiefs who says, "Oh, I met this colored man, and I don't remember anybody ever calling me that, but I was fascinated by that. So I had to explain, what colored was, and I'm African, and we have colored. Anyway, but it's important that we understand what is or what has happened. And so I liked the way you made reference to addictions that came on our shore. It wasn't there before. This is something that came on. And unfortunately, that has lingered on. And sometimes, I've heard comments about indigenous people that are really, really painful, but they're coming out of ignorance. And so a broadcast of this nature helps people to understand. And of course, we're going to have this on record. It will be played over and over again in the months and years to come so that people get to understand. So, when we talk about First Nations, um, Vic, would you take a moment to just um, enlighten us? What comes to mind, things that you would like to let us know? Because we have brothers and sisters in Africa who have never met an indigenous person. In fact, I remember some people are like, what do they look like? You know, when I look at you, I mean, of course, I know that you are First Nation, but you know, it never crossed my mind until some other people are asking me, oh, what do they look like? So when we talk about First Nation or First Nations, are there some things that you'd like to bring to our understanding just to enlighten us? Because some of us, like I said, we are so ignorant, we just don't know.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you once again. All right. Like you said, I am Cree, and I do have some Scottish blood within me as well from the fur trade era of the history of this continent, of this country, really, with the Hudson's Bay Company coming in here, as mentioned, 400 years ago. And with that influx comes the integration of courtship, I guess, and combining the indigenous Cree people with the Scottish, and boom, out comes Victor. So, my mom was a beautiful soul. Her last name was Chichu, Laura Chichu, and her family lived in the bush. And they did not speak English. They did not speak any colonial languages at all, just Cree. And they were rich with knowledge of the land, of the medicines, of the practices, of the teachings, of the ceremonies, which they held close to their hearts. And the Cree, in contemporary terms, the Moose Cree, are a populace of about 5,000 plus, and they stem right across this country, right across from BC to Newfoundland, with where they're living now. There are about 2,000 of us still on the island of Moose Factory, and there are about 3,000 out there in the greater world, um, with their Moose Cree heritage. Um, the Moose Cree are considered a progressive First Nation within the country of Canada because of our steadfast knowledge of business and economic development and prosperity in those terms for the future generations of our populace, our population. And saying that, we have other neighbors that are that are Cree as well, but they're not Moose Cree. They're different. There's three different dialects in the James Bay area. If you look on the map of Canada, you'll see James Bay, and then you'll see Hudson's Bay. Both colonial names, by the way. James Bay has we are Moose Cree speaking, which is our which we're referred to as Illilowick with the L. And further northwest of us is the N dialect, which, for an example, if I say the word no in my language, would be mula with the L. If it was up further west coast, it would be N, the N, so it would be muna. And on the east coast of James Bay, they're the Y dialect. So the word no over there would be moi, moi. So moi, mula, Muna. So in that context, we're all Cree speaking, and we understand to a point of our Cree speaking language, and as well, I should mention that just like the Scots that came here, the Scottish people that came here, that were employed by the monarchy and the British colonial system of the Hudson's Bay Company, we intermarried as well with Albany and Saskatchewan on the northern coast, west coast of James Bay, and the east coast of James Bay. We intermarried as well. So, and a great example of that would be my wife. My wife is half East Coast Cree and half English. her dad came here in the 60s to teach from a community called Midland, Ontario, which is about 200 miles north of Toronto. And he never left. He taught here for 40 plus years. He never left. He met and married a Cree woman from the East Coast, and they came down to Moose Factory to work and live and raise their family. So that's a beautiful example of the marriage and intermixing of cultures, if you will. And now we have four children that are both Moose Cree, they're East Coast Cree, and they're English, and a bit of Scottish is there in there as well. So it's quite a, a big mixture of languages and cultures that exists along the James Bay coast, both coasts, and the southern coast of James Bay as well. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're Cree are about, and we are still steadfast in our language, in our culture, in our ceremonies. In fact, our ceremonies are making a comeback. They're getting stronger as each year passes. Where the low part of that was probably in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, where the low turn of the ceremonies. The ceremonies went in fact underground, and they're now coming back in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. They're coming strong now. So in that sense, we're coming back.
That is wonderful, and thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Now, I'd mentioned earlier that we are on StreamYard. Actually, there is no more StreamYard. It is TikTok now, and so I also see a note here. Caroline Machiri says, "Hi, I'm watching from Zimbabwe." That is
Oh,
wonderful
hey.
to know. Thank you so much for joining us, Tete Caroline. And you made reference to the use of the land and how things have moved from what they were to what they are now in terms of embracing the culture. Because there was a time that some of
Oh,
these
I lost
ceremonies,
contact
if
with you.
not all the ceremonies, were
You're
actually,
frozen.
you know, they were
Not sure
actually
what's going on
forbidden.
here.
You know, I think you're
You're
still on.
frozen.
It kind of flicked, but you're still on. There was a time that those ceremonies were actually forbidden, and yet the people were so resilient. They
I
were
think I'll
hanging on to
reboot you
their
because you're
cultural.
frozen.
They remained
Hold on.
committed to their
I'm not
culture.
sure if you hear me at all, anybody, but
Yes, we can
I'll
hear
try to
you.
reboot this. Somebody was trying to call me. That's why I lost connection.
Okay,
Just let me reboot this.
all right. We will allow him to reboot as we continue. There was a time that the cultural ceremonies were actually banned, they were forbidden, which is really, really terrible when you think of people who have lived all their lives in this part of the world, have cultural values, that someone comes into your space and they tell you, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's just it's terrible. It's not acceptable at all. But I guess those are the realities of colonization. A very, very brutal process of changing and basically decimating or annihilating a people group. And so it is encouraging to see how these ceremonies are actually coming back. In fact, once Vic comes back, we're going to talk about how they actually use the land to bring healing to the lives of brothers and sisters in the area, so that they heal from the past. And it is important for us to embrace who we are, and you don't need permission from anybody to be yourself. It is really important for the other people to accept that, this is who you are. And of course, every culture has good and bad things in them. And we cross pollinate, we share ideas from each other just to make sure that we become better people. And so our brother made a reference to the culture coming back, the ceremonies coming back. And I witnessed that, how people are coming alive, embracing who they are. And obviously, one of the things I appreciated very much is the presence of uh, God, people connecting with God. And I don't mean God as you can define him in whatever way you want. No, that's not what I mean. I mean connecting with the biblical God who has revealed himself through his son, Jesus Christ. I know this is not a religious broadcast, but it's important for us to actually embrace that because, to be aware of that because that's part of who we are, and not just native Canadians, but also Africans and other people around the world. Actually, it's interesting, isn't it, that I mean, Christianity is a revelation from God. It's foreign to every culture. That's why no one has a monopoly of it. We all access it the same way that the scriptures refer to Jesus as our way to God. And so, of course, we express that culturally. But one of the things that stood out for me while living and working in Muscree, or with Muscree First Nation up in Northern Ontario, was the connection with the land, how people respected the land so much that you don't just cut trees. They would remind me in so many ways that these trees have life.
Life.
They are alive. That's why they are there. They are growing. They are alive. There's life in them. And so you don't just chop them down, you actually have to say a prayer to God, to Chimandu, and actually tell him what you're going to use this for. You don't just chop things, you don't just destroy things, but you go through that. And the other thing, Vic, there that I found very, very fascinating and encouraging was when we would go to pick up plants, and you will be told this represents this represents that, this is able to heal this. There was nothing of spirits. It's just knowledge of their land, understanding how to navigate the river, how to navigate their winters, which are pretty brutal for most people who have never had the opportunity to be up there. I mean, you're talking about from middle of November until end of April, everything is frozen. You see these 18 wheelers and big trucks bringing supplies or going across frozen rivers and lakes. I mean, it's just fascinating. And so, tell us about the use of the land. There was such an emphasis on the use of the land, even for our brothers and sisters who were dealing with addictions, who were dealing with grief. There would be this intentionality to connect with the land. Now, enlighten us on that. Like help us to understand what would happen and what is the value behind that.
You've heard the phrase Mother Earth,
Yes.
uh, which is true for us. The land to us is life. So is the river, the water. Um, the land to us represents medicines. They represent our ancestors. When we speak about the land, we say that our ancestors are always with us, around us, and through us, because that's where they go back to, is the land. And I've never heard an indigenous person here in this region, in this country actually, say that they did not like going to the land. They've always were gravitated, were pulled to the land for healing. That's the primary one, for healing, for a sense of security, for a sense of of calmness, of a spiritual connection to something. Um, this is why we as Cree people always go to the land to heal. Every year in April for a month, our community shuts down because we go on the annual spring goose hunt, um, which has been going on ever since we've known, ever since we've been here as Cree people in this part of the world. The annual spring goose hunt takes us out into the bush where we're free of electricity, we're free of running water, we're free of the Western world amenities, if you will. And for us, that's fine. We exist. We've always existed in the bush, on the land, and we teach our children, we teach our grandchildren all these important skills that they need to ingest and take within them to be able to survive on the land without those amenities. And we also heal out there. We get away from the busyness of the world, the craziness of the world, the mass media, the sense of being lost in such a crazy, fast-paced world, that could go out in the bush and we calm ourselves. We connect with ourselves face to face. No social media, none of that. We just connect and talk to each other one on one, and we come back to our community stronger and revived, and as if as a strong healing has gone on within us and within our community. So that happens every April in Moose Factory and along the communities on the James Bay coast as well. So land to us is extremely important in a literal sense and in a spiritual sense as well, because it's who we are as well as ASCII. ASCII is Cree for land. That's what we hold in our hearts, along with our children and our ancestors. So I hope that gives you a bit of a sense of what land land
It really,
does to us.
yeah, it really does, Vic. Thank you so much for explaining that. So, how did colonization affect ASCII? Like what happened? How, like, I'm asking this, Vic, because there's this resurgence now to the land. So what had happened prior to this focus? Now let's go back to the land. What had happened to the land? I mean, I have heard statements like stolen land, which I actually believe there are some people who are living on stolen land and now they actually think it's theirs. But I won't get into that. Don't get me started. Uh, you know, we won't get into that. But what had happened to the land in such a way that our brothers and sisters, our native Canadians, now are like, we need to go back to the land. What had happened to the land?
Okay. Um, Let me start by saying that our brothers and sisters in Africa know very well the history of land on that continent, with the British and the French and the Spanish, and occurred all throughout the world, in continents like Australia and South America, Europe. Um, the concept of colonization is nothing new to us as stewards of the land in Africa, and here in Moose Factory in Aotearoa, which is the colonial name, the colonial name for Aotearoa is New Zealand. So points elsewhere in this beautiful world that we live in, the concept of colonization is what happened to the land. Same here, Moose Factory. The British and the Hudson's Bay Company, the fur trade empire, uh, showed up on our shores some 400 years ago with no money, with no food, and with uh, no property to land. So how did that go turn into a 180, where we were stewards? We had our own governance system. We had our own social systems, our own religious, spiritual practices, and boom, within 20 years it flipped. And I'm sure that has happened in Africa and
Yes.
other continents in this world. So this is what happened to the land. There was a British monarch who declared this Rupert's Land and who declared it terra nullius, which is a term that is referred to as there's no people existing on that land, which is, as you know, false. So they declared it property of the British monarchy, the British Empire, which is ridiculous. This is why I have troubles. This is why I have a lot of trouble with the Treaty 9 in our area, where the today's governments of the feds and the province, provincial government, the federal government, sign. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Yes, we can hear you. You kind of disappeared for a little bit. Yeah, so our brother Vic is just describing how people showing up on your land with no food, with no money, with no property, uh, you know, end up reversing the whole structure and taking over the land which they didn't have, which wasn't theirs, and claiming that to be theirs. I mean, um, I mean, those are the realities of colonialism, and of course, we know that it leaves the
Can you hear
very
me?
very sad reality. Yes, we can hear you, Vic.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Apologize.
That's okay. Yeah. So you were just explaining about someone coming with no money, with no food, with no property, and now reversing the whole structure and now claiming to be this is mine and yet it's not theirs. And so I agree with you with the direction you're going with the treaties. It's almost like now you're signing a treaty with somebody who you have no business signing a treaty with because this is not your land. And yet
Exactly.
you have come in to claim that, you need to sign here so that we're in partnership. There's no partnership. I mean, you basically you are on stolen land. You have stolen the
Yeah.
land and now you want to take indigenous people and say, listen, let's put you on the reservation. By the way, part of this whole thing, Vic, and I'm so glad that we have you, the First Nation, having this conversation with us because you know that historically, Canada, white Canada, if I might use that term, or I should say European Canada. I really don't like the use of black and white because I mean it's so. I mean that colorization just ticks me off. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. Um, they actually took a group of people to go to South Africa to learn. I mean this is the European Canada. They sent people to South Africa to learn how the uh, uh, European South Africans were treating the local people, and of course, we know that's where apartheid and all that came in, which is really really sad that Canada would send people to actually learn how to relate to indigenous people by learning from people who were doing it wrong. But anyway, this is a new day, a new age, and I think it's important that people understand that this is all part of the history that now makes um, uh, you know our brothers and sisters, the First Nations, the Métis and the Inuit, who they are. And when we talk about these are indigenous people, these are native people, these are the people who call Canada, North America, their land, and everybody else becomes an immigrant. But unfortunately, we have some people who came a few years later and now they think everybody else is an immigrant and this is their land. So it's that whole concept. But it's really really sad. But you were talking about how that was reversed, and so the land was taken away, and now brothers and sisters, like most Cree First Nation, you're saying let's go back to the land to find our healing and bringing up uh, the ceremonies and the belief systems and people being proud of who they are. What would be some of the challenges now, say with regards to young people, you know, I know that there were times that you would take young people to the land-based program as well. So, what would be some of the challenges facing, say, Moose Cree, with regards to connecting the cultural elements with our young people?
Hmm. My son, his name is Mexican, which is Cree for wolf, is attending college, a community college, some 400 miles south of us here, in a community called North Bay, Ontario, in the province of Ontario. He's passionate about Cree, about learning Cree, and he has taken it upon himself to learn his Cree language, his Moose Cree language, and other dialects as well. We never told him, we never asked of him to do that. He's doing it on his own, and he's quite an anomaly because not many young people 20 or under are doing that. Any Cree people under 20 are doing that anymore. I think that has to do with the influx of these things here, these devices, and the Western world of the push of social media and computers and technology. That has a major influence in our young people in this community of Moose Factory, and I'm sure across the country as well, across the world, of how much of an influence and a force really uh, Apple has had, and other major multi-billion-dollar companies have had on our young people, because they just embrace it, they just gravitate towards it. So that's a challenge for us, like your communities as well. Whoever's listening to this, that's a big challenge. Another one is the loss of language. When you lose your language, you become part of the melting pot. You are just another Canadian. You're not distinct. So we here in Moose Cree are trying to battle that with quite a few books in Cree now, in Cree syllabics and the Cree language and the Cree dialogue that have been happening in the last 15 years. We're just about to release another one next week, actually, on the Cree language. So that's happening, but there needs to be more of a push in the terms of having Cree taught from grades JK to grade 4,
Mm,
strictly Cree. They'll learn math in Cree. They'll learn English. They learn history in Cree. They'll learn geography in Cree. That's my push, and that's my wish for the Moose Cree language. Because right now there's only about, I'd say, less than 100 people that speak fluently the Moose Cree language, um, which is an epidemic, which is a crisis mode for us, really. And this is why, young people like Mohican are trying to save it in that sense. And his future study is going to be, I think, linguistics at a university somewhere down south, further south, is what he's been talking to me about. So I think that's encouraging, and it's also inspirational as well for me and other people that are older to try to relearn their native language, their indigenous language. So when you ask me what's the battle with the youth and being Cree, I think those two are the big ones, and
mm.
the third one is addictions, as we spoke to, we alluded to earlier in our conversation about addictions and the battle of identity. I think that if you learn your language, you have a strong self identity and a strong sense of where you want to go in this world, as a grounding, as a base. And those three are the big ones for youth today, with being Moose Cree.
Vic, you're just touching on a live wire here because I can assure you, sir, that you go to any African country today, those three are like right at the top. You know, the influx of technological devices and how that has infiltrated. I mean, it has its good points, but I think it also can bring people into very depersonalized kinds of lives. And so uh, everywhere you go, young people have cell phones, and it's important. But we also have to understand that it's not just me, myself, and I. We live in a community where we are to relate to other people, and then loss of language. You know, that's a big thing, because everybody now thinks that, you know, if you speak English, then you know this is it. So we find that some of our young people are actually abandoning their language, you know, their languages, which is really, really sad. I mean, you go to Zimbabwe, where you know Shona and Ndebele are the local languages, but people are thinking that, you know, if you speak English, then you know you have class. You know, you go to other
Mm.
parts of, you know, other parts of Africa where they speak Bemba and Chewa and Kiswahili, and you know, um, just different languages, and our young people really need that guidance from us who are older. Help them to appreciate, like you said, your identity. And then you have addictions. You will be surprised how much of life has been affected by drugs in Africa. We have young, it's an epidemic right now. It's really sad. We have politicians who are actually importing drugs into some of the countries because they're making money. They don't even care about the future of young people. And it's really, really sad. And so when we talk about connections between, you know, the Africans and native Canadians or indigenous people of North America, I mean, the issues that are being fought or being faced by our brothers and sisters here in North America are the same ones over there in Africa. So there's so much in common. And I just wanted you really to speak to a young person who is going to be listening to Vic Linklater, who is First Nations, and you want to talk to them about the importance of language, the
Mhm.
importance of language. You just highlighted that you want Cree, you know, you want Moose Cree to be the mode of learning, you know, the method of learning as far as, you know, history and advancement and future and all that. So talk to someone outside of Moose Cree and just let them know the value of language. What does language do? What why? Because we don't want to despise our local languages, our cultural languages, because that's who we are. So
Okay.
talk to us. Talk to us.
Okay, for the youth that are watching in Africa, for me, the Cree language word for heart is dehi. The Cree word language for a tongue is gitehi. So when you speak from your heart. That's a teaching in the Moose Cree culture. And I am positive and sure that there are teachings amongst your elders in your small towns and in your communities that you can go to learn, start learning about the old ways, the ancestral ways of your language, wherever it may be in Africa or in this world, that you do have access to, and you have an opportunity to do that. So I encourage you as a man, as a baba, as they call me, and my grandkids call me baba, to do that, because it's
Vic,
important
Vic,
to
Vic, I'm sorry for interrupting you. You just said Baba. In Shona and in part of Southern Africa, the word for father is Baba. So it's this close. So go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. That's so cool, isn't it? It's we're
It
so
is.
connected. Indigeneity is so connected in this world. Baba in my language is what they call grandpa or grandfather in the English world. So still in a sense of connectivity, that's so cool. So I encourage the young people to do that, because when I was 16, I was 13 years old. I was teased at school because a lot of my friends understood Cree. I did not understand Cree. I did not know how to speak it. I understood a few words and a few terms, but I really couldn't grasp it. It wasn't until I was 30 years old that I'd learned that my granny, my gukum, uh, explicitly told my dad not to teach them Cree, because she said that they would have a better chance in the white world, in the bigger world, to be successful. And for me to hear that at 30 was, boom, was so enraging and so hurtful to hear that. And I was angry for a few years after that. And then slowly, as I got older and had my own children, I began to understand that it was a colonial expression, a colonial uh, way of a mindset, kind of like an indoctrination, if you will, of the non-indigenous world upon my granny, my gukum, to say that, because she was part of the residential school system, and that term is a massive topic we can talk about in another show. But the Indian residential school system in this country, as well and in the States, occurred, and that a massive, huge uh, explosion of hurt in our indigenous communities across this country and continent. So I would encourage all the young people that are watching in Africa and other places in the world to go seek out those ancestral uh, people and elders, to learn about identity, about self. Because once you start doing that, you'll feel a sense of grounding into the land where your roots would take foot, and your roots would take into the earth, and you get a stronger sense of self and more confidence as you go out into that big world, because it is a big world.
It really is. And I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh wow, time has just flown by. Listen, we definitely have to bring you back so that we
Yeah.
can talk about some of the things you mentioned, especially residential schools, because even right now in Africa, I'm sorry to say this to some of my brothers and sisters, they actually believe that there's value, and I think to some degree there is, but people seem to value taking their children to boarding schools
Mm.
is the in thing because it has class. But what we don't realize, especially from my experiences with the Muskri First Nation, is that giving your children away to someone else to raise them has long-term effects that you have to face for the rest of your life. It is parents' responsibility, and I know it is debatable, and I shouldn't, paint everybody with the same brush here. It has its positives and negatives, but really, outsourcing that aspect of your life and letting somebody else train your children is something that we have to face in future many years to come, because it's someone else raising. It's one thing for children to go to school and come back home, you know but of course there are nice schools that have been established out there where the children are gone for the rest of the year and then they come back home. So basically someone else is raising your children. Yeah, sure, you might be giving them money, you might be doing all kinds of things, and that's debatable, so we'll talk about that another time. But we'll definitely want to bring you back to talk about that aspects of you know uh, indigenous education and some of the things that happened in the past. I must hasten to say this. I think one of the most powerful things for me was to meet some of the elders in Moose Factory who are actually survivors of the residential schools, how they were impacted. I think of elders like Nelly, and elders like um, sailors, sailor, and many others, and see how they have come around and are impacting young people so that they can have their, the sense of who they are and be proud of who they are. It's just something we can never move away from. And one other thing I should mention is I was surprised coming from Toronto to Northern Ontario in Moose Factory, of course. I was surprised to learn that I never came across any sense of seniors abuse, because in that culture, in that context, in that environment, elders are the keepers of knowledge and people have tremendous respect for them. But you go to big cities in Toronto, where they, and other big cities around the world, Nairobi and Accra and Lagos and Pretoria and Johannesburg and Zambia, Lusaka and all that. Some of us, we are resorting to putting seniors in a residence where they are on their own. But I found that even though there was a project at some point, and I don't want to get into politics here, there was a project in Moose Factory where they were trying to do that, and the seniors were actually resisting. We don't even call them seniors, the elders. They were resisting that because they had been in this environment where they liked, even though there was something new and built, but it's like, no. I actually was fascinated by that. And I think that's something we could also talk about. So we will definitely have you back, sir. There's no question about it. Vic, I know that you were away and you came back and you graciously accepted our invitation to have this conversation with us, and I'm so grateful you did that. And we will definitely bring you back. But as we come to the end of our time together, and of course, our viewers and our listeners, you are here with yours truly, Dr. FM, Dr. Francis Munangi Mpindu, here on Luvbay Afrobeat Music and Talk Radio, your number one global Caribbean African online radio. And we have the honor and privilege of having this conversation with our brother here. So our brother would like to give you an opportunity to speak to us,
Yes.
just, and you just say, I've talked about so many things, but listen, I'd like to leave you with some nuggets. These are things I would like to leave you with. So would you
Yes.
take a moment to just land this plane for us? Just
Hmm.
speak to us, sir. Speak to us. I
Okay.
know that you are the former land-based, but I can tell that your heart is still in the land-based, and we need to embrace that. So speak to us, sir, as we wind down.
Right. I I'm a musician. I sing. I play in a musical band, and for me, music was my saving grace in this world as a young man. And today, to this very day, I still sing and I still dance. So I know many of you are musical. You have music within you. So keep embracing that. And there's an expression that I use, which is people will not always believe what you say, but they will always believe what you do. So keep
Mm.
doing the good work, keep doing the goodness in this world because this life is short. Embrace it. And here's another short one I want to share upon the listeners and viewers. And that one is your trauma. If you've ever been hurt in this world, your trauma is now your wisdom. Use that wisdom and take it forth and share it, and so that your children and your grandchildren and you can grow from it. Don't stay stuck. You move forward because trauma is your wisdom. Good. Timigoj, can I ask more then? I'll see you again. Timigoj.
Jimmy Gwedge, sir, thank you very much. What a delight it has been to have you join us as our guest today, and we will definitely have you back. By the way, that's not a threat, it's a promise. So we want to make sure that you will be ready, and we know where to find you. So we'll be knocking on your door so that you can join us and just again bring these nuggets and words of wisdom. I mean, I liked what you said. Your trauma is really your wisdom, and don't remain stuck. And we have brothers and sisters around the world who have been hurt by
Mhm.
so many things. It could be grief, it could be relocation, it could be loss of money, death, anything. And you're saying, don't remain stuck, because there are solutions and options in life. And so, thank you so much for being a voice of hope. And what a delight it is to be talking to a brother, First Nations, a First Nation brother who knows what it means to value the land, I should mention this. One of the things that I learned as well, among others, is that, yeah, people use the word hunting, but it was more of harvesting, you know.
Yeah.
And then I also learned that you never try to um, uh, kill an animal that's running away. You know, it's stressed, it wants to live, so you don't do that.
Mhm.
You lie in waiting, and whatever Chimandu, whatever the creator brings to you, that's what you take down. And I was just like, wow. So there's value and wisdom in patience. And I remember one night we went, looking for moose. And I remember, my brothers and, saying, did you hear that? And I not heard anything, but their ears and everything, they are so attuned to nature that they would
Yeah.
hear sounds and things that I wasn't hearing. And so it's just fascinating, how we can depend on the land. And so thank you so much for joining us and enriching our lives today. And my own life has been enriched through the experiences of working with you and some of the brothers and sisters in Moose Factory. And I'll never be the same. And I was speaking to my significant other, and I said that my life has been enriched in ways that I am so eternally grateful for. And there were parts of me, I was telling her, and I said there were parts of me I didn't know were actually broken until, I started seeing my own life from the lives of my brothers and sisters. And so, even though I was working there, one of the things I was trying to be conscious of is, listen, I remembered the words of Lila Watson, an Aboriginal lady from Australia, who said that, if you're coming to help us, you're wasting your time. But if your own life is tied up with ours, then we can talk. Even though I wasn't originally from there, there's value in just being part of what is happening and embracing that and say, I am here, I want to be part of this. And so you're such a welcoming community over there. So keep up the good work, sir. And again, to our viewers, thank you for joining us today on Love Bay Afrobeat Music and Talk Radio, your number one global Caribbean and African online radio. And what a delight it has been to have our brother Vic Linklater, who is the former land-based program coordinator with Moose Cree First Nation, and he is First Nation himself. So we're talking to the real Canadians here, the real deal. Everybody else is an immigrant except our indigenous people. So again, we thank you, Chimigwech. Thank you for welcoming everybody to Canada and allowing them to make it home. But let's never forget that it is your home and we are guests. So again, thank you, our viewers. Thank you for joining us. And this has been your host, Dr. FM, Dr. Francis Munangi Mpindu, here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, and to our chief engineer, Mr. TYB, and the rest of the executive team, Miss Jen. Thank you so much for creating this platform to allow us to learn. And in Canada, recognizing the reconciliation or the truth and reconciliation process going on, which is really ongoing. And you connecting with the Aboriginal People's Television Network to even connect with them and celebrate some of the happenings in Canada. We really appreciate that. So, and by the way, coming up on the hour at 1 p.m. is the Caribbean Flavor with Mr. Marcus and Miss Jen to Blue, and you don't want to miss that. So again, thank you so much for being with us today, and keep on keeping on, as our brother said. Continue to be a voice of hope, and we will see you again, as they say in Cree, Chimigwech.